Parsha Vayetze. Appreciating the holiness of a place. A lot of citations will try to simplify what we have in front of you today. At the beginning of the Parsha, after Yaakov has had his dream of the ladder, let's set the stage first. He's just left the land of Eretz Yisrael, or is on the way out of Eretz Yisrael. According to our sages, he still is in the land of Israel, but is at the border, and he's about to leave. And he goes to bed before, because the sun has come down. He has a dream of a ladder, angels ascending and descending the ladder. And in that dream, Hashem promises him that he will watch over him and take care of him, and that there is a destiny that Yaakov has to fulfill, and Hashem will never forsake him until he has fulfilled that destiny. The aftermath of that dream of the angels ascending and descending the ladder is, as the Torah writes in Pasuk Tez Zayin, Vayikatz Yaakov mishen aso, that Yaakov awoke from his slumber. Vayomer, Achein, Achein, indeed, Yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh. God is in this place. Ve'anochi lo yadati, and I didn't know. Now, why did Yaakov think that there wasn't God in that place? And why was he so surprised that God was in this place? So we'll see that in just a minute. Vayira vayomar, and so he became afraid. That's literally what Vayira means. He became afraid or fearful. And he said, Manorah hamakom hazeh, this place is truly awesome. Ein zeh ki im beis Elokim v'zeh sha'ar hashamayim. This is none other than a house of God, and this is a gateway to heaven. Next pasuk, Vayashkem Yaakov baboker, and so Yaakov arose in the morning. Vayikach es ha'even asher sam mirash asav, and he took the stone that was beneath his head. Vayasem oso matzeva, and he made it a monument, and he poured oil as to represent some kind of sacrificial offering, as essentially saying, I dedicate that last night's sleep to Hashem. In other words, the rock that I was sleeping on, where I had this prophetic dream, is now the object of my worship to Hashem, sort of to memorialize the events that took place while I was sleeping. So Rashi tells us that when Yaakov said, Va'anochi lo yadati, I didn't know that this was a place where I could find God. Rashi tells us that Yaakov was lamenting something. He says, She'ilu yadati lo yashanti b'makom kadosh kazeh. He said, had I known that this was such a holy place, I would not have dozed off.
I'm thinking of the people who nap during shul.
Yeah, especially during the rabbi's drasha. It makes me feel guilty because I put people to sleep. But let's unpack this a little bit more. Take a look at of what the Netziv, Rav Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin of the 19th century has to say in the Ha'amek Davar. Ein zeh ki im beis Elokim. And he writes like this, and the language is beautiful. Makom misugal latefila kebeit Elokim. It is a place that is propitious for prayer, like a house of God. Where I slept last night, there was something holy intrinsically in that place, like being in a house of prayer. Al kein efshar gam ata lihitpalel v'la'asot masha alav. And therefore, Yaakov says, if this is a place of divinity, then it's not too late. I can still do something to sort of symbolize proactively that I am acknowledging the godliness of this place. And that's why he takes the stone and anoints it with oil. So he gives us a mashal, he gives us a parable now. He says, "V'harei zeh domeh le'echad sheholichuhu al yedei hamelucha lemakom ma'asar." We can compare this Yaakov situation to a person who's been arrested by the government And they take him to a place of imprisonment. V'lo yada klal ayeh eifohu yoshev. And they take him blindfolded. See, he has no idea where he is right now. V'choshev bilibo, ilu haya hamelech mizdamein lekan, haya mitpalel lefanav u'misader ta'anotav. And he thinks to himself, I'm an innocent man. I don't deserve this treatment. And if only I could have a moment with the king to speak with him and entreaty the king, I could make my case, I could plead my case, and maybe the king would have compassion. Aval ata lemi yedaber v'yitzak. But now that I'm imprisoned in this foreign, strange place, who's going to listen to me? Ve'achar kach ira shehaya yashen, uva'amdo hodiuhu she'avar po hamelech. He then takes a nap, and when he wakes up, they tell him, oh, you just missed the king. He was just here while you were napping. V'haya mitzta'er harbe al zeh, sheyashan b'sha'a shehaya mesugal lekavot yeshu'a v'rachamim. And he was so upset. Just imagine the tremendous lament that this person has, because I was sleeping at a time when I could have stood up before the king and offered him my words of entreaty. Ve'achar kach yitchonen da'ato alav v'hitbonen shehamakom me'uyam al ha'omdim sham lishmor kenahug. But then he sort of settled his thoughts, and he realized that the place itself is a place which is worthy. If the king is passing by here regularly, then this is a place where at least I have a hope that even if the king is not here, I can accomplish something, because the place is awesome to the people who are here, the guards. Vehevin mizeh ki kan hamelech matzui. And therefore he understood, based on the fact that everyone is standing at attention, everyone is very, in this strange prison where he finds himself, everyone is wearing a very proper uniform and is very positioned properly. This is almost like the guards outside of Buckingham Palace. He knows that this is a very special place. And therefore, Vehevin mizeh ki kan hamelech matzui. And so he realizes, even though I don't see the king can't be that far away, even though I don't see him right now. Al kain tza'aku bikesh ad sheyishma hamelech. And therefore he starts yelling. So I don't see the king now, but he's got to be pretty close by, so let me continue calling out, and maybe the king will hear me from one of his windows. Kach haya Yaakov b'yitziato l'chutz la'aretz makom shemama mi'inyanei kedusha. This was Yaakov's attitude as he was leaving Eretz Yisrael. He figured, I'm leaving the Holy Land in a very chaotic situation where I have to flee from my brother Esav. And who knows what I'm going to find there? It's a hinterland. It's a land that's devoid of holiness. Kamali bo u'v'saro lakel chai, and he felt, I'm distancing myself from Hashem. How much I pine and yearn to be close to the Ribono Shel Olam. V'hinei hizdamein sha'at hakosh l'rot uzo uchvodo b'chalom. And then all of a sudden he falls asleep, sad that he's so distant from his king. And then all of a sudden he has a dream. And in this dream he sees God's majesty. V'harei yashan ba'ota sha'a v'kafal tzaro. And when he wakes up, he's so upset. He says, had I realized that holiness was still in this place, I never would have bothered to fall asleep. I thought that I'm going further and further away from holiness and from Hashem, when in reality Hashem has been with me all the time. Until he realized that there still is awesomeness and holiness in this place. And therefore he did what he did. And so the first lesson I think that we need to take from here is that God is found in the places where you least expect him to be found. And so don't ever think that you can slouch off and fall asleep because God is not around you. There are times when we feel the most distant from Hashem, and he's right there. You know, there are two conflicting attitudes towards discussed in the commentaries about a person who is in the middle of his Shemona Esrei and he finds his mind wandering. Has that ever happened to you?
Yes.
Or is it just me? And there are two approaches for one to take in a situation like that. The standard approach is to berate yourself and to say, how distant am I from my spirituality? How distant I feel from Hashem, when even I'm trying to say words of entreaty and supplication and praise to my Lord, and it's just God and me. There's no one else around. I just can't get my stuff together in my head, and I can't focus my thoughts. That's a reflection upon the tremendous distance that must exist between where I'm supposed to be and where I currently am. And that's one approach, and it's not an unhealthy approach for a person who knows how to berate themselves in a healthy way. But there's another approach. It's the approach of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov used to say that if you're trying to daven and you find yourself overcome with distracting thoughts, this is a sign that you are truly a great tzaddik. Because it means that the Yetzer Hara is beating down with extra intensity to try to prevent your prayers from being effective, because prayer from you is so powerful that the evil inclination will do anything in order to prevent those prayers from coming to fruition. And so therefore you should be encouraged by the fact that you're so distracted in your thoughts, because that's a sign that if you're able to just get a few seconds of concentration, you'll make tremendous breakthroughs on a real metaphysical level.
So in practicality, how you deal with it? How you put yourself on the right path, so to speak?
There's many different methodologies that are offered by the poskim and by the Jewish thinkers about how to put yourself back on track. But the best thing to do is to not beat yourself up. I do believe in that approach. The older I get, I'm more sympathetic to the Baal Shem Tov approach, to the Hasidic approach. And it's really to basically say to yourself, boy, Hashem must be really waiting for those prayers, because it's so hard to get them out and to get focused. So I'm just going to take a moment. I'm not going to say anything. And I'm going to devote, when I really feel that I can get it together, I'll focus for 30 seconds on just one line of tefillah. And then if my mind wanders after that, that's okay. See, we always have to negotiate with ourselves. I feel we have to make negotiations with ourselves, especially when we find ourselves with so many distractions in life. So don't tell yourself you've got to have kavanah for every single word, but negotiate and say, for the next few lines, I'm not going to let my distractions affect these next few lines. And then we'll see for the next paragraph. Rav Dessler talks about this. He talks about negotiating with the Yetzer Hara. And he says, he talks about it in the context of a yeshiva bacher who finds his mind wandering during his Torah learning in the Beis Medrash. And he says that if you find yourself unable to study, don't fight the Yetzer Hara with a frontal attack and say, for the next hour I'm going to focus, because it's almost guaranteed that you'll fail. But if you tell the Yetzer Hara, okay, just 5 minutes, and then you can have whatever you want. Just give me 5 minutes of clarity, of the ability to learn, and then I'll let you take over after those 5 minutes are done. Then when the 5 minutes are over, you can renegotiate. You say, okay, 5 minutes, not bad. Can you give me another 5 minutes? That's really the way to do it. And I think the same thing is true with tefillah and a lot of things that we do in life. You have to learn to negotiate. That would be one methodology. Yes?
Last night I was in a class that we're learning the Shemona Esrei. And the Rebbitzin said that the most important thing is the first verse, because that's when you're coming to Hashem. So when you take those 3 steps back, you're leaving all the crap in this world behind before you take the first 3 steps towards Him. And you should try to concentrate on the first
paragraph is the most important from a kavanah standpoint. She's absolutely correct. Linda, yeah.
What we do in mindfulness meditations and prayer is to gently guide the mind back to the prayer. rather than getting into judgment or conversation, just a gentle guidance.
So what is that gentle guidance? What does that look like? What is that?
Oh, my mind's wandering, just let me refocus.
Yeah.
Many, many times over.
So you just keep repeating that. My mind is wandering. Let me refocus. My mind is wandering. Okay. You may have to experiment a little bit with yourself before you find what works for you, because there's so many different methods. Okay. So that I think is the first lesson. The first lesson is that when we least expect godliness to be present, that's where Hashem is. You can't use your intellect to gauge the kedusha that is around you, the holiness that is around you. If even Yaakov Avinu was unaware that the divinity was right over his head, then how much more so must we realize that even in those times when we feel the most distant, the darkest in our lives, that's when we can sometimes find Hashem. The other thing that I wanted to point out is from the Shalah HaKadosh. In his commentary to this pasuk, he says something very important that is not discussed a lot in synagogue life, but it has to be discussed. So in source number 4, he says, Vayira vayomar ma norah hamakom hazeh. So Yaakov is fearful and he says, how awesome is this place? So the Shalah HaKadosh lives in the 16th century. And Rav Yeshaya Halevi Horowitz, anyone who's a Horowitz is in some way related, either cousins, uncles, whatever it is, to the Shalah HaKadosh. Ro'ui la'adam she'yamod b'makamot hanichbadim be'ema u'v'yir'a u'v'tosafot kedusha. A person should always try to position himself in honorable places, such as the synagogue, we'll discuss in a minute, with a sense of awe, fear, and added holiness. V'yihiyeh morash shamayim alav b'dibur u'v'machshava u'v'ma'aseh. And the fear of heaven has to be upon him in the way that he speaks, in the way that he thinks, and the way he behaves. Al kain, and it's for that reason, hamisaper sichat chulin b'veit hamidrash u'b'veit hakneset. If a person engages in idle conversation in the Beit Midrash or the Beit HaKnesset, in the synagogue, Av shelo bishat limud v'shelo bishat tefillah, even when it's not during davening or during Torah study, misalek mora shamayim me'alav. Such a person really, essentially, removes the fear of heaven from off of themselves. V'hu isur mosif al isur shel sichat chulin. And he's only adding one violation upon a primary violation. There's a second violation on top of a first violation. What does he mean by that? What he means is that, we'll see in the halakha in just a minute, a person is not allowed to engage in sichat chulin, in idle conversation, when inside a synagogue, because he's showing disrespect to a holy place. But the secondary violation is, not only have I in some way disrespected the holiness of my environment, but I've also affected myself intrinsically by removing the fear of heaven from off of my own intellect, from off of my own neshama. So that's a secondary violation. You understand? You can disrespect your environment, but you could also adversely affect yourself. And that's the second isur, the second violation that you commit when you engage in idle conversation. Now, I've often said this, and I don't think that this is rocket science, what the insight that I'm about to provide for you, but I think that it's basic human nature. And that is, so often we see, and maybe this is more the guys than it is the ladies, I have never seen men speak to each other as much as inside the synagogue. In other words, you can have guys sit down behind a television set and not say a word to each other for 2 hours. We're perfectly capable. Men are, by our nature, are not big schmoozers. But put a group of guys in a shul, and it's like they're 12-year-old girls. They don't know how to stop speaking sometimes. So So what is it about the synagogue? What is it about a shul that creates not only is it inappropriate, but it actually engenders conversation? So my insight is simply this. It's the discomfort with the silence. It's the discomfort with the solitude and the alone time that we're called upon to have with the Almighty when we're inside the shul. People by their nature who are not prepared, or perhaps not in the proper mindset at this moment in their life for whatever reason, to really stand before God and to acknowledge I'm currently standing in front of God, and He's sort of like they're waiting for me like this. Okay, what do you got? I'm not ready to face that. So quick. I don't have my smartphone. Well, I got to do something to escape the present. So what am I going to do? Oh, there's a guy next to me. Nice tie. And then we get to talking. And that's the psychological phenomenon that I think is so prevalent in our congregations. And it has become, therefore, socially acceptable for people to come late to shul, because it's also a method of avoidance. We always avoid doing things that are difficult and are uncomfortable. And that's the reason why we teach our children from a very early age to habituate synagogue attendance. Because we know by nature it's not always something that we look forward to an encounter with the divine. And the problem is that the more it becomes socially acceptable to get into these habits of talking and coming late and not facing our Creator in the times of prayer when we're called upon to do so, the more degradation to the whole enterprise of communal prayer becomes. And it's a serious problem. I don't have a solution to this very serious problem other than to talk about it as much as possible and hope that people will listen. I bring my case to the ladies first because I think that you play a very influential role in making a difference. Yes, what did you want to say?
I see another, an opposite, that there's such comfort for men and women in the show that they can think they can digress. I mean,
well, we want people to feel that this is their home. We do want people to feel comfortable in a shul. I don't believe in the old cathedral style, very with the top hats and all that stuff. I mean, I come from California, remember, so we want people to feel laid back and comfortable, but we also want them to feel that there's something awesome happening at the same time. So yes, you're right. It's the familiarity breeds contempt kind of phenomenon as well. Yes, Patricia.
About what happens with the women. Over the years, I've noticed a change. When Lynn and I were first when we were in graduate school in University of Pennsylvania in the 60s, very interesting time, we started going to the minyan. There were two minyanim. There was the Hillel minyan, which was a conservative minyan, and the Yavnei minyan, which was Orthodox. The conservative minyan had mixed seating. Yavnei had a sheet down the middle of the room.
Mm-hmm.
And across, the women were completely cut off.
Mm-hmm.
In the conservative minyan, nobody talked. In the Orthodox minyan, the men davened and the women chattered all the time because they were completely cut off.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, I've noticed as more and more women are becoming more and more educated and learning more and more, a lot of the women who were Orthodox had very superficial Jewish education. As the women's education deepens, there's more and more davening and less talking. So that may be one approach, as far as,
I'm always looking for that. I'm always looking for solutions. And if you ever want to shoot me an email and tell me what you feel the solution would be, I am ready to humble myself at your feet and take your wise counsel. So you just let me know. But maybe we won't get to all of those solutions today. I just wanted to throw out the issue, let you know that it's a serious issue. And as we'll see, let's take a look at the Shulchan Aruch. Source number 5. Batei Kinesiot, this is in Siman Kuf Nun Aleph. Batei Kinesiot uvatei midrashot ein nohagin bahem kalut rosh. Synagogues and study halls. One is not permitted to conduct oneself within them in any sense of levity or frivolity. Kagon, for example, sechok, vihitul, v'sicha b'teila. Laughter, mirth, joking. Idle conversation about stuff. Yeah? So, says the Mishnah Berurah, just learn a little bit of the Mishnah Berurah in the last couple of minutes that we have. The reason why one is not allowed to have frivolity in a synagogue is kihem nikraim mikdash ma'at, because a shul, after all, is called a miniature or minor temple. That God says, I will always have for them, even in their exile, a temple facsimile. And when it comes to the Beis HaMikdash, the Torah says quite explicitly, revere my holy places. That the fear of he who dwells there, namely God, should be upon you. The Katav Bismak, Shaba'avon Kalut Rosh, Beveit HaKnesset, that the Sefer Mitzvot Ktanot writes, one of the medievalists writes, that because of the sin of levity in a shul, Nehepachin Lebeit Avodat Gililim Chas V'Shalom, that synagogues turn into churches, God forbid. In other words, you might think it's just because of the decline of the neighborhood, that eventually the shul has to sell the building to a church. No, it happened because there was idle chatter and frivolity in the shul. The Arizal says the same thing. The Arizal is quoted by many of the other poskim, says that because of talking in a shul, synagogues are destroyed. God forbid. And then he says, we won't have a chance to go through this entire paragraph, but he says, V'sicha b'teila, idle chatter. Hainu afilu sichat chulin, shehi letzorach parnasa debachut shari bebeit hakneset, debachut shari bebeit hakneset asur. He says, the Mishnah Berurah says like this, he says, listen, there are many times that conversation is not idle. It could be very relevant. I mean, after all, we need to talk about how, I got my business partners sitting right next to me in davening, or my investor, my real estate investor, or my wealth manager is sitting right next to me in shul, and I have very important stuff we need to talk about. This is not idle. This is relevant. So it may be very relevant, and it's perfectly legitimate to have that conversation outside of shul. But inside a shul, when we say sicha b'teila, we don't just mean idle conversation, we mean mundane conversation. Ubifrat sicha b'teila legamre. And by the way, there's an additional prohibition on Shabbos, as you understand, to talk about wealth management and things like that. Ubifrat sicha b'teila, nit Shabbos garet. I hear you're selling your car. Nit Shabbos garet, yes. Nit Shabbos garet, how much? Nit Shabbos garet. 20,000. Nit Shabbos Garet, I'll give you 15. Nit Shabbos Garet, you have a deal. Okay, anyway, you know that old joke. Okay. Ubifrat sicha b'teila legamre de bavadai sharei limnoa tamid mizeh. So therefore, if mundane conversation is prohibited, then certainly idle conversation. Uvizohar hakadosh parshas Vayakel hiflik ma'od begodol ha'avon hazeh. The Zohar really goes to bat and talks extensively about how really serious of a crime this is. V'kol shekain sheyesh lizaher beveit hakneset uvebeit hamidrash me'avon diburim asurim. And then it goes without saying, and the Chafetz Chaim launches into this whole additional issue of, see how easily idle conversation degenerates into prohibited conversation. Lashon hara and rechilus and machlokes. So you see, in other words, even though we think, with this idyllic world where the Chafetz Chaim lived in the town of Rad and everyone must have been a malach, right? It's not that way. There were plenty of malachim in the town of Radin, but there was still talking in shul, and people got into fights. My Rebbe, Rav Kinerik Zol Zayin Gesund, who's in his 90s now, was my Rebbe, about 35 years ago. So he told me that he remembers in Europe when he was a bacher that there was a sign in the back of his shul that said, Asur lahakot be'egrof, that you're not allowed to use your fist to hit people. So you can imagine, there was a lot of wild stuff going on back then. People would get into really, people were passionate about their ideologies, and he's a Zionist, he's a Bolshevik, people would get into really serious conflicts back then. Today we don't, how's the herring, I like the spicy, you like the creamy. Those are the things that we fight about today. So we're not going to get into fist fights about them. But at the same time, we have to be very, very careful. So, you have a role to play. We all have a role to play. Let's try and keep that in mind. That when Yaakov Avinu says, Manorah hamakom hazeh, this place is awesome, and had I known, I wouldn't behave that way. Let's try and remember that whenever we walk into a shul. Have a great day, everybody.